Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Lunchtime Special Podcast, a show about life, death, and everything in between. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hello, lunches, and welcome to the Lunchtime Special, the show about life, death, and everything in between. Today's episode is about that one event that happens every 4 years, the craziness that takes over nations, the Soccer World Cup, or football for our UK friends overseas. But what is it about? What does it mean to be a fan of a sport or even a fan of a player? And why do we care about it so much as a nation? On today's panel is myself, the host, Ian, and Spre.
Hello, hello.
Tish.
Hi, Tim.
Saranga, a.k.a. The Void.
Yo.
And Brad.
Hello.
Awesome. So where I'd like to start is with people's personal stories of the first moment that they really remember the sport as being a big part of their lives, or if not at all, where was the moment where you noticed sport and just went, nope, I don't want anything to do with that? Who'd like to start?
I'll start with a bit of somewhat of a horror story. One of the reasons why I opposed to a lot of the competitive sports in our culture. Back in the day, talking about the late 70s, early 80s, in Australia, our soccer teams were arranged in ethnicities. So you had the Italian soccer team, Greek, the Serbian teams, the Croat teams. So on the surface, great. The soccer teams, all friendly, let's play a game of soccer or football. The reality was it basically became an ethnic war every weekend with flares, riots, just fights continually. It caused the end of that league due to the violence week in, week out. I have vivid memories of seeing on television people running around with flares, igniting the stadiums, throwing chairs. I remember some footage of a man who had a chest of drawers or a wooden chest, and he was literally hitting a person with it. I don't know why he brought it to the match. Effectively, the political issues at the time were played out on the field. So when the team lost, particularly if it was a Balkan state versus another Balkan state, so Serbian versus Croat, they let loose and it became quite horrible. As a child at the time, I was a kid in school, for me, I equated effectively sports equaled violence, because in the school playground, we had animosity between the kids who are from different ethnic backgrounds, because on the weekend, their team would lose and then basically carry it on to the school playground, and you'd have bullying and have violence. So this humble game of soccer became an epic war that affected children and affected families and affected the players.
Yeah, it's a very common thing that happens in soccer leagues, particularly. I think, it's interesting you talk about the Serbs and Croats, because that actually became an issue here in Australia, where in the old National Soccer League, there was Marconi Stallions and Sydney United, I think, were the two teams. And again, you only supported one or the other because of your particular ethnic background, and it did turn into that kind of ethnic underground war in a way. I mean, this happens in South America quite a lot, where it's probably not unexpected for people to kill or seriously injured just because of who they support. And I always find it really strange that coming from Australia, that we're a very relatively relaxed kind of country, that anyone can get that worked up. But then there are even examples here, and this is something I'd like to share with the panel, or ask the panel to comment on. Do you think it's the actual nationalism that is inspired by sport, or is it just hooligans looking for an excuse to fight?
I'm not really sure whether it's professional hooliganism. It varies. Nowadays, it may not be the same ethnic issues. Back in the day, it would be someone's parent, someone's dad who's gone to the match and basically lost control and attacked the opposing team. They brought their own trauma from their own war-torn countries and politically destabilized countries, and wanted to let loose and have their revenge on other people. I don't think it was actually hooliganism. I think it was literally just people with grudges and just found it as an excuse.
So I guess for me, just to talk about my experiences, kind of completely opposite, in the sense that one of my most vivid memories is when Australia made their first World Cup in 32 years back in 2005. And what was strange about that was, well, I've always been a sports fan, so for me, just the idea of supporting a team and being part of it was fine. But then you got people who had never talked about sport in their entire life, and then suddenly they became major fans. And then when we went to that match against Uruguay, where we qualified, and there's there's another side note. I actually say we qualified, even though I didn't participate at all, other than, cheering along. But I just remember vividly us scoring the final penalty and then people just hugging everywhere and being so excited and proud and celebrating. And I feel like it's the same kind of thing as what you're talking about, Spre, but just in the opposite side of the coin. And whilst it sounds like, and it's very true that this kind of tribalism does have extremely negative effects, it can also have unifying experience as well. And I'd like to pass to Brad, because I know that you have a story, maybe not on a national scale, but I know that you've had an experience which helped within your own family, I guess, unifying yourself.
So, it wasn't soccer related, and I wouldn't necessarily say it was tribalism, or it was in a way. So my first memory of sport would be with my grandfather. So my grandfather was a heavy supporter of St. George Dragons in NRL, and I've just sort of followed down that path. So we used to quite regularly just catch up and watch a game together. So I have quite a positive sort of outlook on football, because it wasn't just the football itself. It was, spending time with my grandfather, basically. Yeah, not much of a story.
That's a good story. And I think that a big part of why people start following sports, because my dad used to follow the sport, or my grandparent, in your case, used to follow the sport. And again, the rationale in one side of the coin where people are following teams purely based on racial lines, and then on Brad's side, people following teams purely based on familial lines. And I don't know, it's just interesting how that then gets ingrained. And Brad, you'll never be a supporter of another team other than St. George Illawarra now, and it's purely because of your influence of your grandfather.
Yeah, I agree. With my son, I wouldn't be forcing him to enjoy the same team as well, because I think it's also fun when they don't like the same team, because it creates that sort of, competitiveness between us. Obviously a light-hearted competitive, or hopefully a light-hearted competitiveness.
Yeah, until he drops
hitting each other with wardrobes or anything.
Yeah. What about you, Saranga? Have you got any experiences you'd like to share?
Yeah, mine is cricket. It's always been cricket from the beginning. It was during 1996 when Sri Lanka won the World Cup against Australia, and this was the time actually that we were migrating from Sri Lanka to Australia. Even before that, the fact that within Sri Lanka, and I'm sure at least you can relate to this in India as well, cricket is followed like a religion, and the players are treated as gods in that sense, because they are the models, the heroes for the kids in that era. For me, in 1996, when I was young, that time when Sri Lanka, a small island in the global scale of things, winning against Australia, which at the time, they still are at the moment, number one in terms of ranking-wise, it was a big, huge thing for me. And even now, I still follow cricket, but the interest has dropped down a bit. But I see the value in that you having a team or a nation that you can follow. But also see now how sports are getting so corrupted in that sense, where money comes in and where match fixing, spot fixing, all those things, it just makes me want to look away. But at the same time, I understand it's been part and parcel of every institution in society where it does get corrupted. But for me personally, that was the 1996 World Cup. And also recently, most recent time, 2014, where T20 Sri Lanka won against India as well. So those two things are the most important ones for me.
So I'm curious, is it more because Sri Lanka was winning, or is it because you felt some sort of nationalism to Sri Lanka?
There's a nationalism side of the things as well, because it brings back memories for me as well, to be able to relate back to the country that I was born in and was raised in. So there's that aspect of it as well, which I enjoy and be part of it as well, yeah.
I actually find it quite interesting you talked about the players being idolised and seen as gods, and particularly a cricket example recently was Steve Smith, who was pretty much idolised as the ultimate Australian cricketer, like the good boy image, a national hero, and then he got caught in the ball tampering scandal, and then his image completely changed. And I'm just curious, I'm curious to the cricket fans here, did your view of Steve Smith as a hero change for you, or do you just see him as a normal guy who made a mistake?
I see him more as a normal guy making a mistake, and I see this in the past as well, a lot more in the past as well. But he's getting more and more now in the mainstream media, in the spotlight. But at the end of the day, even though we treat these guys as heroes and models in our lives, they're humans. They're going to make mistakes, but they should be made responsible for what their actions are. But at the same time, it's up to the individual to also reflect upon and see why they are doing that and how they can learn from that and improve from that as well.
So, Atish, you come from the subcontinent where cricket can be not just a sport but a religion, and it's so intrinsically tied to Indian culture these days. As someone that's experienced that firsthand, I'd love to hear your experiences and your views and how things have changed for you over your lifetime.
Well, cricket has been, as my memory I remember, cricket has been a game which was being cherished and available everywhere in the corner, wherever I could look into. Every street, every ground, every farmland which was available and not doing the crop business was being dominated by kids around the streets. Let's play, no matter what temperature you are in, what weather you are in, what climate condition you are in. So people in India, since my experience, I collected my experience, I have been seeing it, and still today it is just, it's exponentially in people's head. Oh, I want to be Virat Kohli. I want to be a Brett Lee. I want to be a McGrath. It's not that much available, these names, but back in time, 10 years back, 15 years back, when I was in schools, people were just remembering name of cricketers, especially Australian cricketers, Indian, Sri Lankan, as like gods. So Adam Gilchrist is playing, Steve Waugh is playing, and it was like a daily talk. The kids are gathering around the streets corner in the evening, and what they are going to talk about the square cards, about the pulls shot, about the sixes, about the fours, and all the sledgings happening. So that was a kind of consciously and subconsciously people's head were just engrossed in this, and definitely at that time it was too much emotional connection. So it's like you are identifying yourself with playing cricket only. I remember I used to just eat in the morning, 7 o'clock, and then I used to disappear. And my family used to run behind me. And it was like 35 degrees Celsius temperature and playing test cricket. And till the evening, 6 o'clock, when the sun doesn't, get to the dawn, you are playing cricket. There is almost you are ready to sleep in the graveyard because you have got no muscles and bones left because you are playing so much and eating nothing. But yeah, cricket was such a passion, and it still is. So, now there is not much left. I don't follow cricket for the last many years because it doesn't make a lot of sense now. But yes, definitely for many years in this children, in childhood, it was like, it is something divine. Sachin Tendulkar, Shane Warne. Okay, just adding 2 points about Shane Warne, spinning to Sachin Tendulkar, and Sachin Tendulkar is thinking, okay, I'm going to play Shane Warne in a way that, because Shane Warne was a nightmare for the cricketers at that time. And Sachin Tendulkar devised a technique that he used to swipe him and he was just, and then Shane Warne said, oh, this little boy comes in my dreams now and hitting me sixes. It was like, it was that time. For sure. Yeah,
I find it interesting. You relate it definitely back to your childhood, and I think also for you, Saranga, it definitely was a childhood thing. When you were playing cricket from dawn until dusk, were you imagining being any particular player? Like, who was your favourite that you wanted to play?
Oh, well, I used to imagine McGrath when I used to ball. And when I used to spin, I used to imagine Shane Warne. And I used to imagine Yuvraj Singh. If you remember this name, Yuvraj Singh, Rahul Dravid, Sachin Tendulkar while playing the shots, imagining Adam Gilchrist when taking the pull shots, touching to the topic of tribalism. And, I remember that on many layers, even in the one street with other street, one village to other village, one town to other town, and many teams in the same town, many teams in the same village, they were all in the sense of tribalism, one way or other.
That's a good point, Atish. The fact that within cricket, so in soccer, this has been there for so long with the European League and everything. In the recent time, cricket, with the advent of the T20, began the whole movement of national leagues, like domestic leagues, with IPL in particular, which is now huge. And that's I see more and more players, the new generation coming up, they're not more into the nation now. They're more into their individual profile and the money that just comes along with it. That's why I think Test in particular would slowly disappear or either test or one day. But I think with any sport, this is always going to be that the next generation will try and keep pushing that boundary. But I think we got to keep a lookout for the fact that how money in the adventure of sports.
I mean, it crumbled now because there was a time when the national teams, they used to play against each other. Now we have got IPL, like Indian Premier League, or in soccer you might have got, football league where different countries players are coming in, mixing up, playing against.